Good morning and welcome back to Margin. This morning we're going to talk about taxes and the certainty of taxes. So let's jump right into it. So this past year has been a challenging one. It has been a unique year in that we have had so many aspects of the status quo changed, thrown out overnight. And so with that, when you have seen rent moratorium, you've seen a mortgage forbearance, you've seen student loan deferrals, as well as stimulus packages, and also natural disasters, there's no surprise that last year around this time that we had our tax due date moved from April 15th back to July 15th, just in the wake of everything. Now this year, there has been an extension automatically put in place from April 15th to May 17th. So now you have a little bit more time to prepare your taxes to make sure that you factor everything in, especially being that there are so many more components to it than what would be considered in a typical year. So in preparation of your taxes for this year, if you are currently serving overseas, you automatically receive an extension beyond that May 17th date. There are also provisions put into place for the natural disasters that have happened in Alabama, in Texas, Oklahoma, to name a few. And so you'll want to look into what provisions have been put in place even beyond that to ensure that you have the proper tax date in mind. So with that, when you are going through the process of filing your taxes this year, and with all the considerations to put into place, you may consider doing an extension if you end up needing one, but just be mindful that that extension needs to be submitted in prior to the tax day of May 17th. So although you may be working with a very simplistic tax return process, you may be able to use something like a TurboTax to file your taxes for free, and you may be able to use some kind of platform like that. But for many people, many Americans, you may want to consider using a tax professional. And I say that, and I usually recommend that because you get a whole level of professionality that comes with a tax professional, and they are able to look at your specific situation to figure out not only what you qualify for with regards to tax deductions and provisions otherwise, but they'll be able to be in your corner to help you be more proactive with your taxes rather than reactive. And I encourage people to look into this because although it can be expensive to file your personal return with a tax professional, at least you're getting a set of eyes on it to ensure that it's done properly, that you're not going to experience having late fees or having aspects that are not done properly, and that you have a vote of confidence that you have someone who is in your corner, who is a CPA or a tax professional otherwise, that can review that and just make sure that you have all your bases covered. So I personally use a tax team on both the personal return that I have as well as my business returns. And so they look at a proactive approach to prevent penalties, to ensure that I'm paying what I need to pay, but not any more than I need to pay. And so they'll look at each of the businesses and look at how that will end up flowing down to my personal tax return. And so it's more of a proactive approach, and it may be a lot more complex than certain people otherwise, but it's important to look at whether that makes sense for you, whether it makes sense to have a second set of eyes on your return and on your taxes to be able to look at your documents and your receipts and so on and so forth to see if you're missing anything. Now, if you are going through that process right now and you're trying to figure out everything that's happened over the last year and the various challenges, the various unique situations that have caused your financial picture to change, as well as your taxation to change, you may want to consider jumping on the IRS website and filing a Form 4868. And this form will basically allow you to do an extension beyond that May 17th date. Now, with that, you're still going to have the estimated tax for your return due on tax day, but it will allow you to complete the return at that extension date, the deadline. And so you'll just want to keep that in mind as something to consider. Now, with that, when I was going through the process of looking into those extensions, there is a number of different resources. So when I was going through the process of looking into Form 4868, as well as the extension otherwise, knowing that a number of people are dealing with and concerned about needing to file an extension this year, I found some aspects that they published with regards to this that I found to be helpful. And they stated that an extension of time to file your return does not grant you any extension of time to pay your taxes, as I mentioned earlier. You should estimate and pay any owed taxes by your regular deadline to help avoid possible penalties. You must file your extension request no later than the regular due date of your return, which was May 17th. Filing this form gives you until October 15th in a typical year. We'll see if they actually changed the date for this year, being that they moved back the tax date by a month. To get the extension, you must estimate your tax liability on the form and should also pay any amount due. So that form is 4868 again, and you will want to go through that process, or at least have your tax professional go through that process for you. Now, there are so many people who file this extension, as I mentioned, and I believe it's going to be more even this year with the challenges of the last year. So in a typical year, we're looking at about 10 million people who file extensions. So that's the extent of the impact of the number of people who are actually filing these extensions. Now, another thing to keep in mind is if you are planning to max out your Roth IRA and your IRA contributions, you'll want to keep in mind that the date has not changed from April 15th to max that out. And so as a reminder, the limits for your Roth IRA contribution is $6,000 for 2020. Now, that is unchanged for 2021 as well. But if you are above, at or above the age of 50, you also get an additional $1,000 towards maxing that out. So you get a total of $7,000 towards maxing out your Roth IRA. So now that you know the filing date that has been moved for the tax filing year of 2020, now that you know how to file an extension, whether you have a tax professional or not, and also what the date is of your Roth IRA contributions. Now, it's going to be important to know next what the tax rates are for 2020. So you can estimate those on your own, whether you file through a TurboTax of sorts or through a tax professional. So this aspect I will be going into in this series specifically, but something else to consider is the fact that we know that there looks to be some pretty significant tax reforms occurring in the 2022 year that will affect taxation going forward. And so I'll be keeping an eye on that. And as those documents become available, I'll go through that in a later episode, allowing for, a level of preparation in that direction and being proactive rather than reactive with that. So my call to action today is really to look at these three components and figure out, whether you have the documents sorted out, ready to go for you to file your taxes. And if you don't, in this series, we're going to go through a process of making sure that you've covered the bases for that. Now, beyond that, you want to see if you do have a extension that's necessary and for you to file that extension, as well as max out your Roth IRA. But the purpose of this is really to get you started and to bring you up to speed on what the deadlines are coming up. If this information is helpful to you, please do like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you're reminded to come back on a daily basis and improve in managing your personal finances. Thank you for your time. Enjoy your day, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.